Welcome back to the Conscious Entrepreneur Podcast. Before we start today, I just want to remind everybody that we are in the middle of planning for the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit in May in Boulder, Colorado. I can't wait to see everybody there. There's a lot more information coming, so keep an eye out for all the cool things that we are going to be announcing soon. In the meantime, today's episode is one that you really don't want to miss, and it fits perfectly with so many of the themes that we talk about all the time within our community. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Like I believe many of you, but I for sure, I am addicted to the struggle of being an entrepreneur. And my guest today, Dr. Nona Djavid, says that that's actually not unusual. She says that most entrepreneurs aren't actually addicted to success. They are addicted to struggle. We push harder, we work longer, we wear burnout like a badge of honor. But what exactly is it that's keeping us stuck? That's what I wanted to know. And that is what we cover in our conversation today, including things like how subconscious beliefs about scarcity and worthiness keep entrepreneurs stuck doing the same things over and over, the role of the nervous system in breaking free from overwork and burnout, and 4 steps to making a true quantum leap in your business and in your life. That's all what we cover today. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Nona Djavid. Hey, Nona, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, Alex. Yes, thank you for having me.
I'm excited for this conversation because your work runs through so many of the themes that we talk about all the time on the Conscious Entrepreneur podcast. Mindset and hustle culture and how to think about success and how to think about the work that we're doing and the journey that we're on. And so I really appreciate the chance to connect with you. And, there was one thing that really stood out to me. And I'll put my hand up right away and say, I am an addict. I am addicted to the struggle.
Mhm.
And, for me, a lot of my entrepreneur journey has just been how much can I go out there and force my will and bash my way through whatever obstacle is out there. And, we all talk about pushing a rock up the hill in the rain and stuff like that. And to me, that's the definition of this kind of this struggle mindset. And you have talked quite a bit about that. And I think the way that you've framed it is, entrepreneurs aren't actually addicted to success. Many of us are addicted to the struggle. So let's kick off there. Tell us more, share your stories, share what that really means.
Yeah, wow, that's definitely starting with a punch. I think one of the most controversial things that I say to entrepreneurs is that you are addicted to that dopamine. You're addicted. You have this addiction to the struggle, and I don't just say that because I made it up. I say it because I actually personally experienced it. When I first started my very first business as a brick and mortar business, and I always knew I was going to be an entrepreneur, but the driving force to being an entrepreneur, a lot of it at the time of when I began had to do with scarcity and fear. Like, I don't want to be like my parents. I don't want to be in this situation again. I want to be able to walk into a store and buy the things I want to buy as a 16-year-old, right? Which is when I first started my first business. But in that process, I didn't have the awareness or the consciousness to understand, and this is all obviously reflecting back, built my first business. It was really successful on paper. If you would, my entire life looked really successful to other people. If I laid it out, on a piece of paper, it'd be like, I'm married, about to have a child, have a business, 13 employees, doing really well. As a matter of fact, in my coaches, oftentimes they would sort of use my business and go, be more like her. Except I was underneath it all. I was not only a slave to my business, but I had built this life where I was trapped in and had zero fulfillment. I remember one day I was on maternity leave and I walked over my son, who's now 9 years old. So we're talking 9 years ago. He's almost 10. A decade ago, put my son to sleep. He was a brand new baby. Took his probably like fifth nap on that day. I took a phone call with my team at the time, went over some numbers, just like very typical entrepreneurial stuff. Except this day was different because I literally walked myself into the closet. I shut the door, I shut the lights, and I sat down in that tiny little closet and held onto my knees and I started to sob. And I don't remember
Oof.
the last time I was sobbing that much. And there was this illusion, this dichotomy or this conflict of like, why am I so unhappy? And of course, part of it was the postpartum hormones, but the other part of it was I had literally built this life that looked successful. I kind of went after all the external things. I checked off all the things off the list. And then here I am sitting in the closet, unhappy in my marriage, trapped in my business. And no matter how much money I was making in a successful business, I was a slave to it. And I just didn't have the fulfillment or even the free time to be able to enjoy it and be present with my child, with my one kid at the time. And I remember having a vision shift in that closet. One of the things I recognized was how much the driving force to this process of me getting to that point had to do with scarcity. How much it was ingrained in my mind that I had to struggle to be successful. I had to work so hard to be successful, almost like you have to have the scars to be worthy of the next level. This resilience is a beautiful thing, but if it's ingrained in the wrong direction, then, nowadays I work with entrepreneurs that are uber successful and yet they do not feel abundant or free
Mm.
or fulfilled. So in that dark closet sort of recreated some ideas. And then I went into a whole dark night of the soul in the following year where I studied, I already had a neurology background. I studied ancient wisdom and universal truths and got deep into quantum physics and, spirituality. And I started to recognize where the shifts needed to happen, which was more of an inner mastery in order for me to have the ease and anchor ease and fun and enjoyment and contribution and peace to business or to life instead of being hooked on and addicted to the struggle of success.
And you said that when you were doing, and can we call this hitting rock bottom when you're curled up in the closet inside your house?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So when that's happening, you said you have a shift in perspective and you start to understand the role that scarcity plays in your mindset and how it's, essentially taken over your way of thinking because
Mhm.
it's unconsciously driving you to do things, right? How did you figure that out? Like what was it that you saw or felt that allowed you to realize that scarcity was the issue there?
I think it was a sense of not enoughness in every area of my life. As a mom, I felt not enough. As a wife, I'm no longer married to the person I was married to back then, but at the time, didn't feel enough. In my business, no matter what I did, it just never felt enough. It just felt like there was always something more to reach. And so I remember thinking there's got to be a better way. Like Price Pritchett, I don't know if you've read his book at the beginning of his book, his phenomenal, like maybe 30 pages of a book that's super powerful. It's called U Squared, and it's about quantum leaping. At the beginning of that book, he shares this story about the fly that's on the windowsill, and he's banging his head against the windowsill, like sees freedom on the other side, and is doing the thing that all the other flies have done, and he thinks and you might even show up to the fly and open the door or open the window or try to get it to go outside into where the freedom exists. But all the fly does just like banging his head against the window. And that's literally how I felt. And so in those moments, what I did know, Alex, is that what I was doing had not worked. So I had to do something that was different. And I couldn't just set another goal and go for it. It just wasn't, it was going to be more of the same thing. It was going to be banging against the windowsill.
And for a lot of us, we try to solve these problems in our minds, in our heads, right? So I might have a realization, oh, scarcity is driving me, or not being worthy or not feeling like I'm enough is what's driving me. But it doesn't necessarily work just to say, okay, I identify that in my head and now I'm going to solve it in my head. And so you've shifted into, talking about the energetics of success and like what's going on in the rest of the body. I think these are really, really interesting concepts that will help a lot of people who are stuck, who feel stuck and who feel like they're on enough, or who have these recurring patterns. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I think what was really pivotal and has been transforming for me would be to combine my background in neurology and really make sense of things. Because most entrepreneurs, all entrepreneurs, we're really smart individuals. So we can, hyper analyze or just analyze the situation. We can take out some of the things that are limiting us. We can name them. We can literally name them. I mean, oftentimes these things are blind spot. We can figure out what they are. We might even have a strategy to get to the other side, but we will never get there. Why? Because the nervous system has been feeling safe in the struggle of success, right? I mean, the most common, easiest example is Pavlov's dog. You ring the bell, you give the dog a cookie, there is saliva, there's a physiological effect. You keep doing that, and then over a period of time, you ring the bell, there is no cookie, there is saliva. So those are the wires that have been running together and they've been firing together. So they're hooked on. So for most of us growing up, our definition of success based on the things our parents have said and has been planted into our subconscious mind, our definition of a successful life, wealth, creation, even contribution is oftentimes linked up with the struggle. So there is an addiction. There's a level of addiction that goes together with that. It might be seeking validation, seeking significance. I'm not good enough, therefore I got to do the things to be worthy of. So, and then on the other side of this is, okay, well, how do I unhook my neurology? And the only way to do that is, in order to break a pattern in the nervous system, there are only two ways to do this. One is trauma. So we're already familiar with this. It's not ideal, obviously, but if you've ever been around somebody, or if this unfortunately has happened for you, or you've lost somebody you love, or divorce, or a big diagnosis, there is a complete shift of perspective, complete shift of almost identity and habits and rituals that take place after a trauma typically. The second way to make that shift is by repetition, just like Pavlov's dog. So if my neurons are wired to connect struggle with success, no matter what level of success, those two things are going to just continue on. It doesn't matter what kind of life I create. And so to break that pattern is, again, the second way to do that is by repetition. So what's the repetition? What do I repeat? Well, the repetition would be to create something in the nervous system and repetitively give it to your brain that hooks and anchors ease and enjoyment and fulfillment, the emotions that really we want to experience, to anchor them and wire them with, say, success. And again, success in the relationship, success in life and wealth and health and whatever different areas that we are desiring to experience it.
And so we're talking about, there's not a lot of entrepreneur and CEO business podcasts out there that are talking about resetting the nervous system. But what we're talking about is not overthinking wherever we are. Once we have some insight of, hey, here's something that's a block for me, or here's something that a pattern that repeats itself, or here's something that's getting in my way, I can't necessarily think myself out of this hole. I have to change my behavior and my physiology and my way of thinking and all that stuff. And you're saying go towards ease, go toward flow, go toward feelings of satisfaction and fulfillment. And my question is, like, how do we actually do that? And then let me give you an example. So part of my practice is I go to the gym almost every day, but then I go to the sauna almost every day after the gym. And in the sauna, I will often sit there and close my eyes. There's people not talking, and close my eyes and just sort of feel, see how I feel. But then I kind of repeat to myself things around flow, fun, kind of obstacles melting away, all these sorts of things. So I'm in the sauna where my body is already under some amount of stress, right? It's a foreign area. So my body's under some amount of stress, but I'm relaxing and I'm priming my brain to want to accept and be in an easier state. Because like I said in the intro, my natural state is totally addicted to the struggle. What walls can we break through? What can we go out and conquer? This is like battle metaphors, like breaking things and battling and fighting and so on and so forth. This kind of the struggle that's in there. But what my question is, like, how do we actually do this? So it's one thing for us to hear it, and another thing for us to say, okay, here are specific steps we can take right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So how about I go through the 4 steps of a quantum leap? This is a framework that I teach inside of my community, and I think it will answer a lot of these questions. And I'll try to be really brief about it, but give enough information that might be practical.
Great.
First thing I would say is to define a quantum leap, right? So to define a quantum leap says, it would be like, okay, Alex says, I have this addiction to the struggle. And if Alex were to do something that was if you were to do something outside of your identity, outside of who you identify with, that would be a quantum leap. So if I'm going from this sort of parallel life, like Nona's showing up this way, she shows up this way on the podcast, she acts like this, my identity. If I were to show up and do something totally outside of my character, ideally in a positive way, that would be a quantum leap. Now, here's the thing about the definition of a quantum leap. In quantum physics is when the particle goes from one layer to the next layer. But the key part about this is that quantum jump does not require more work on the particle's side of things. It just requires a different energetic state. So in order for us to have access to more in emotions, a range of emotions like the feelings of fun and relaxation and flow and all of those things, we're going to have to shift our energetic state. So when I look back in the past decade, every single time that I have quantum leaped, which means I was outside, I created a life or part of life that was so outside the box in business and relationships, whatever, there were always 4 steps. Whether I knew it or not, reflecting back, there were always 4 steps. So the very first step is creating some level of an unreasonable vision, which I feel like almost all entrepreneurs are like, okay, got that one, right? Most entrepreneurs, if you're setting SMART goals, if you're a small part of the population who set SMART goals, hey, I would encourage you to go beyond that and set in what I call an unreasonable vision. And the reason for that is, and this is step 1, the SMART goal itself, by nature, measurable, realistic, all of those things, it does not require you to step outside of your identity because you already know how to do it. That's the whole, breakdown of a SMART goal.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. So unreasonable goals, and the reason that I'm drawn to that is it fits in a theme for our upcoming Conscious Entrepreneur Summit, which is in May of this year in Boulder, Colorado, where we're talking about 10x growth. So one of the speakers is Ben Hardy, who co-wrote 10x is easier than 2x, and that's exactly what you're talking about. So yes, we could go out there and set the linear goal of like 5% improvement or 10% improvement. That's the SMART goal. That's the 2x goal. Or to your point, we can totally widen our thinking, like much broader, be more driven by an unrealistic future, creating an unrealistic goal for us, and that's the 10x.
That's right. And I love that. It's required for a quantum leap. Because in order for you to get to that unreasonable dream vision or business vision, you're gonna have to evolve. You're gonna have to become the next version of yourself. Different parts of your identity will have to show up. Your energetics will have to be completely different. Parts of you may have to die in order for you to get to that level. So it's almost like a fast track of collapsing time when it comes down to creating that human evolution, or in the process of consciousness. This is what I found will fast track that. So
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Traditionally, therapy, and I'm not saying this to say I'm against therapy, a big fan, but therapy will dive into what's not working, what happened in childhood, what did your mom say, what did your dad say. Understanding the neurology, I would say go where you want, spend your energy and time on where you are headed, and ideally, that is an unreasonable dream life. So what you are doing, Alex, in the sauna, you have a vision for the future and you're experiencing the emotions, then that's the first part, which is the vision. Then you told me you try to feel the things, which basically means you are combining the right side of your brain and the left side of your brain, incorporating the limbic system, which is where we process emotions. The combination of those three things will totally create a pattern, because the patterns actually created, and any pattern that has ever been created includes emotions. So to unhook from any kind of pattern has to include the emotion. It just happens to be a beautiful, elevated emotion. So that will be the first step. The second step in the process is identity. Now, I believe identity is fluid, and I don't mean that in a political sense, but I mean identity is fluid, as in today I could be more confident on this podcast. An hour later, I might be less confident. So which one am I, right? I can express confidence. So I believe we have access to all different traits that we want to experience. We just have to get really intentional about it. So in step 2, within identity, I help my students define, okay, what are the traits that I need to express more of? And what are the traits I need to express less of? What are the habits I need to have more of? And this is all based on the foundation of the unreasonable life.
Mm-hmm.
So you come up with the identity, you expand the identity. In the third step,
before we go on to 3, I just want to make sure I understand point 2 here.
Yeah.
So if I'm really committed to an unreasonable goal or something much bigger than anything I've done before, then I have to accept that, like that phrase, what got you here won't get you there. Mm-hmm. And I have to therefore be willing to question and then shift my identity. So who am I in order to reach that new goal? Because I can say, okay, I have a very predictable track and path in front of me. This is who I am. This is how I work. This is what I like and dislike and so on. And I'm just going to have one kind of view of the future. Or if I really am committed to massive change and doing something unreasonable, then that requires me to not only figure out what are the identity parts that I'm operating with, but also which ones of those do I want to leave behind. And one of the ways that I've heard that this kind of existing outside in the world is like your old friends won't even recognize you anymore, or they won't even like to hang out with the new you, for example.
Exactly. And, I run a mastermind, Alex. It's called 1 Week a Month Mastermind, which I feel like brings on a panic attack for every entrepreneur as soon as they hear it. What do you mean you only work 1 week a month? Or, what's the idea here? It's almost like 4 hours a week. And I tell my students in the mastermind, which are really successful entrepreneurs, if I gave you the 1 week a month mastermind with the 1 week a month lifestyle within your business, like I come in and I give you the lifestyle that you say you want, you work this many hours, you are with your family, you contribute this way, you would have an absolute panic attack. And
everybody would freak out. Totally.
And you'd go right back to where you started. You'd self-sabotage your way back to working hard.
It's because I'm outside of my comfort zone of being addicted to the struggle or being addicted to the routine and the dopamine and all that stuff. Part of it, right?
Exactly. So part of creating the vision is inserting the ease into that vision and giving that to your brain. And then part of the identity is what version of me. So it's more like the CEO version of me and less the owner, business owner, participant or practitioner or manager in me. So I got to tap more into the CEO version to create that is more in alignment with that vision versus the business owner or the small entrepreneur version of me that wants to control or wants to push.
Now, can you give us an example of an unreasonable goal or how you've done it yourself?
Just this, I've had so many different ones. One being when I went from burnout to building my first business where I made a decision. I want to have a part-time $1 million business. That was my early 20s. So that was very unreasonable for me for where I was and where I was coming from. The other one is deciding to live a 1 week a month lifestyle, because I am just like every other entrepreneur. I have this drive and this addiction, but it's something that I fight on a daily basis, and I do it within my vision. But I made a decision that I was only going to work 1 week a month, and I was going to scale my businesses while I did that. And that commitment to that vision has been massive for me. Now, it doesn't mean I don't work on the other 3 weeks. It does mean I have the option. But what I love about that is who I have become in the process and how much of my old self I've had to shed to give myself the space, the freedom, and the ease in the process.
Nice. All right, cool. All right. So we got through the unreasonable goals and then the identity. What's step 3?
Step 3 is the embodiment, which is a lot of what you just kind of described when you were talking about sitting in the sauna. So if I've already done the vision and if I've already identified the version of myself that needs to show up, now I need to embody her. Now I need to embody him. I need to show up as him or her. Now, this is where people get stuck, because most people will go, what? Well, are you faking it till you make it? Because that sounds really ridiculous, right? It's totally valid. I get it. I used to think that too. But here's the thing. What we are doing right now, with all the limitations that you're experiencing, with the thought processes that are blocking us, that is what real faking it is. Because in reality, we have full potential. We could literally accomplish, experience anything that we decide to without those limitations. So you're really tuning into a higher energetic version of yourself. And you're definitely not faking it, because like I said, you're faking it like most likely right now. So
all right. So on that faking it point, mm-hmm. I've heard it said that the brain doesn't know the difference between a thought and reality. And so presumably part of what we're doing here is priming our brain to accept the unreasonable goal, because I don't know. I remember reading something about reading or listening to something about goal setting in the last year or two. And it was like, write down your goals, like some crazy amount of times, like 100 times or 500 times or whatever, and put it where you're going to see them every day and so on. And the reason, I didn't remember who was talking about this, but the reason that they were saying it is the more you write this stuff down, the more you get your nervous system, so the embodiment, to understand that that's a potential future and to open up to it, as opposed to, oh, I just wrote it down once, I put my goal in my notebook and I close it and I put it on my desk and we're going to see it again. It's the repetition of seeing it which actually lands it inside the body, so that the nervous system says, okay, this is a potential. And then the unconscious part of the brain or subconscious part of the brain says, okay, since this is a goal, how do I go and like put all my talents to use to try to achieve it?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So you're getting your nervous system to feel safe in that next level, because the ego feels safe playing it small, because that's the comfort zone. The struggle is the comfort zone, versus that next level. The nervous system does, and that's why we're saying we would go into a panic attack if we actually had that next level life. And I think to take it to the next level with the conversation that we're having here is in the embodiment, incorporating the emotion. So it's not enough to write, because you could just do affirmations and write the things like, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, and if your body is not feeling that, if the cells in your body, you're not embodying it in your nervous system, then it's not going to work. And that's why in step 3 with the embodiment is, I'm going to show up here with Alex as the next version of myself. And I'm gonna drink my coffee like her. I'm gonna be with my children like her. And again, this requires the repetition of the very first step. So that will be the embodiment part.
It's also kind of like I'm changing my standards, or I'm being very clear about what my standards are in how I think and act and behave, right?
Getting intentional about the standards, about the pieces of the identity and habits that do not serve and that do serve. Yeah. And then the very last step is taking unreasonable action. And this part, I see a lot of entrepreneurs probably identify with this if you're listening to this, is taking scarcity based actions. Oh, where are we with our numbers? We got to do this and that and the other, like volumes of work, push through. We get a little bit micromanaging. We get a little bit controlling as soon as the numbers go down.
Totally.
Right?
Yep.
So all of them, those are the kinds of actions I was taking before. And so now I've become present to, taking unreasonable actions, unreasonable for my identity right now. Because my identity right now would be like, let's just 10x and take all this action. But I know where that ends up. It ends up in a 10% growth, which is amazing, incredible, super grateful for. But also it ends up in complete burnout. The scarcity actions, just like when I first started to build wealth and success, it had so much to do with scarcity that it did not end well, and I had to switch that over. So in this process, taking unreasonable actions, it's unreasonable for where you are, but it's not unreasonable for the version of you at that next level of the vision, the identity that you have built around that vision in alignment with that. So and that this is why these 4 steps, you have to kind of go through it one at a time. You can't just jump in and do something that's unreasonable. That would be silly because you don't really have an understanding of the vision, of the version of you, and of the embodiment.
I want to make sure I understand the action part. So are these activities that I would not otherwise do, or are these actions that are based on everything else I've built into, or help me understand that better?
Yeah, these are actions you would not take. This version of you right here would not take, but the version of you living in the vision, in the next level vision, he would take those actions. So I almost tell people, it doesn't need to be some grand gesture. You definitely don't need to go out there and buy a Ferrari, especially if you can't afford it. But how is that next version of you acting? How is he behaving? What are the actions he would take in terms of the business, the branding, the marketing, the sales? And then those are the actions that we ask you to take. There's actually a great research on this out of Harvard. I'm not remembering the name of the researcher, but they did a study, maybe out of Stanford now that I think about it, but they did a study. It's called a future self study. And they had 2 groups of people. One group, they just gave them, for a period of time, they gave them education on finances, right? Like, put your money away, retirement, 401k, pension. Like, they just educated them every single day for a period of time. That was the control group. They had another group where they educated them on daily basis, the same pieces of information that the control group got for the same frequency of times. And they showed them a picture of their future self that was AI generated. Okay, so I'm in some ways meeting my future version of self in this dynamic, in this particular research. And this was I believe it was a long-term study. So I guess years later, they go back and they check in and they find out that people who face their future self, they ended up having better, more intelligent habits when it came down to finances. They put more money away. They did more of the retirement planning and all the things that we are doing. And it was significant in terms of the results between the control and this. So how do you take this research and go, how can I leverage this to my advantage as an entrepreneur and a business owner? I go, okay, perfect. Well, what is your future version? What is she like? How is he behaving? What are her pieces of identity? What are his habits? And sort of, I know this sounds a little esoteric to say, but having a relationship with a future version of yourself would kind of close the gap between where you are and where you want to go. Because oftentimes we see her or him as, oh my gosh, it's so unreachable. Not unreachable, it's just unreasonable, right? For where we
Mm.
sit. So to close that gap, we can create, and these are some of the tools I teach my students is, okay, we got to build that relationship with the future version. And this is all based on brain and the nervous system to, make it feel safe for us to become her or him.
I mean, I always say that growth starts from within, and if we're simply looking outside for whatever validation or success and metrics, then we're not going to feel fulfilled. We've got to do the inner work. And what you're talking about here is really like slowing down, being thoughtful, being intentional, having a clear idea of what does the unreasonable future me care about and like and want and accomplish, and what do they feel like on a
Mm-hmm.
regular basis. So this is the sort of thing that, so many people are going to claim, oh, I'm too busy to do this, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
too busy with my job or my life or my family or whatever it is to sit down and do this. I say that missing this step, skipping this step is setting yourself up for a very mediocre outcome in life versus what it could be. What do
Mm-hmm.
you say to people who are like, I'm too busy for this. I don't have time for this. I tried it and it didn't work, whatever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the when I hear I'm too busy or it didn't work is a little bit more complicated, but I think majority of what we get is I'm too busy. I'm too busy to do that. Well, then keep doing what you're doing. I always tell my students, if you want, something that is wildly different than your current situation, you're gonna have to do things that are wildly different, and ideally, in the process, you become wildly different, a wildly better, improved version of yourself.
And what are the areas? So we outlined the vision, the identity, the embodiment, and the action here. What are the areas where people get hung up and stuck? So
Mm.
if I'm listening along and I'm like, okay, check, I get it, and then I start and I go to try to self implement. Where do people typically need guidance?
I think most people get stuck, to be honest, in getting started, like the vision itself. Most people say, I don't know what I want, or I already know what I want, but they don't have an expanded, juicy version of it where the nervous system can really process. Because the vision itself, I mean, on this episode, in this podcast, I can only share so much because we've limited time, but the vision itself needs to be packed with sensory experiences, mind movies that kind of give the brain something to feel, give the brain something to see, give the nervous system and the limbic system something to feel and combine and integrate those. Um, Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So I think that's where people get stuck the most. And then moving along the process, if they don't get stuck in the vision and say they do that and they're repetitively rehearsing and doing the things, because that's my non-negotiable. You go to the gym and you go to the sauna. My non-negotiable is go through my vision for my life and my business. And in that process, if I'm in this process, people might get stuck in the area of unreasonable action or somewhere between embodiment and unreasonable action, ultimately because of one reason and one reason mostly, which is the the elimination of the things that do not serve. So sometimes when you get to that point of evolution of consciousness and you're at the next level for yourself, there are people that will eliminate themselves, or you may have to eliminate, whether it's employees, whether it's friends, or people that are around you, events, businesses, experiences. When you get to that point, you're actually saying a lot more no's than you are saying yes, and I think that kind of messes with people too, because we're creatures of habit and we like our connection to the things that we have experienced in the past. So I think that's another area where people will pursue a business that they're not happy in, and they just cannot make that elimination. And that usually happens in step 3 and 4.
Got it. I mean, fascinating overview here for entrepreneurs who say they want to do something different, they want to have a different life. That you're giving us here the guide and the roadmap for how to do so with these 4 steps. Now, Nona, just before we wrap up here, when you think back to all the things that entrepreneurs are carrying around,
Mhm.
what's a belief that you wish every entrepreneur would start adopting today?
That I'm worthy and I'm enough.
I'm worthy, I am enough.
Hmm. I think that would be it, because if I'm worthy, then I don't have to prove. Then the place from which I would take action might not be scarcity. Then my goals may not be a form of validation or significance. They are more driven by love, love for creation, love for giving, contribution, service, all of those things.
Fantastic. Great way to give some mojo to the entrepreneurs who are listening. I am enough. And that's going to take away the scarcity. That's going to take away the fear. That's going to take away some of the limiting beliefs and the roadblocks that are in front of us that are keeping us from our lives. Well, Dr. Nona Djavid, thank you so much for joining me here today. Fascinating conversation. Really appreciate you being on the Conscious Entrepreneur podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Alex.